Hello, my name is Rahul. I am from a small town in India, and for as long as I can remember, I have always dreamed of learning English. In my town, not many people speak English fluently, but I used to see it on TV, in movies, and sometimes when people visited from big cities. It always sounded so beautiful and important. I knew that if I could speak English well, I would have more opportunities in life. Growing up, I studied English in school, but it wasn't enough. I could read a little, and I knew some basic words, but when it came to speaking or understanding others, I felt lost. I realized that if I really wanted to improve my English, I had to immerse myself in the language. That's when I set my sights on the USA. I had heard that the USA was a great place to learn English because people from all over the world come there, and English is the main language. It wasn't an easy decision. Leaving my family, friends, and everything I knew was a big step. But I was determined. I wanted to be able to talk to people from other countries, to understand English books and movies without subtitles, and most importantly, I wanted to feel confident when I spoke English. I knew that learning English could open so many doors for me, not just in my career, but in life. So, after months of planning and saving, I finally got my chance. I was going to the USA to study English. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a dream. All my hard work was about to pay off, but deep inside, I was also nervous. Would I be able to learn? What if I couldn't understand people? What if I made mistakes? These thoughts kept running through my mind, but I knew I had to try. For me, learning English wasn't just about speaking another language. It was about building a future where I could connect with the world. I wanted to learn English so I could be part of something bigger, and the USA was my first step toward that dream. Now, I was ready to begin my journey. Deciding to go to the USA was the biggest decision of my life. It was not something I took lightly, but deep down, I knew it was what I needed to do if I wanted to truly master English. I had been thinking about it for months, late at night, after my classes, or even when I walked around my small town. The idea of going to a completely different country, where people spoke English every day, felt both exciting and terrifying. It all started when one of my cousins, who had studied abroad, told me about language schools in the USA. He said they were the perfect place for someone like me who wanted to learn English quickly and fully. When he told me this, something clicked inside me. The thought of studying in the USA, meeting new people, and living in a place where I could practice English all the time, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. At first, I was filled with excitement. I imagined myself walking the streets of big American cities, hearing English everywhere, and speaking it with confidence. I thought about all the places I had only seen in movies: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. I pictured myself sitting in cafes, speaking with people from all over the world, and finally understanding everything without needing subtitles. It felt like a new world was opening up to me, and I couldn't wait to dive in. But then, as the days passed and my decision became more real, the nervousness set in. The excitement was still there, but it was mixed with worry. I had never traveled so far from home before. I had never been away from my family for more than a few days, and now I was planning to leave for months, maybe even a year. What if I felt homesick? What if I couldn't keep up with the classes? What if I didn't make any friends? And the biggest fear of all, what if my English wasn't good enough? I had learned some English in school, but I had never really practiced speaking with native speakers. What if they spoke too fast and I couldn't understand? What if I embarrassed myself by saying the wrong thing or not being able to answer simple questions? These thoughts kept me awake at night, and sometimes I wondered if I was making the right decision. Still, every time I thought about staying home and giving up the idea of going to the USA, I felt a sense of regret, even though I hadn't left yet. I knew that if I didn't take this chance, I would always wonder what could have been. Learning English was more than just a skill. It was a key to the future I wanted. And to get there, I had to take a risk. I remember the day I finally told my parents about my decision. We were sitting around the dinner table, and my heart was racing. I didn't know how they would react. Going to the USA was expensive, and we didn't have a lot of money. I had been saving for this for a long time, but I knew it was still a big ask. But to my surprise, they were incredibly supportive. They saw how much this meant to me, and even though they were worried about me being so far away, they believed in me. My father told me that sometimes, in life, you have to step outside of your comfort zone to achieve great things. His words stayed with me. From that moment on, there was no turning back. I was going to the USA to improve my English, and despite my fears, I was determined to succeed. I started preparing, getting my visa, packing my bags, saying goodbye to friends and family. Each step brought me closer to my dream, but it also made everything feel more real. Some days, I woke up feeling like I was on top of the world, excited for the adventure ahead. Other days, I felt anxious, doubting whether I had made the right choice. But in the end, I knew this was what I had to do. My dream of learning English, of being able to communicate with the world, was stronger than my fears. I kept reminding myself that this was my journey, and every step, no matter how difficult, would bring me closer to the person I wanted to become. As the day of my flight approached, the nervousness reached its peak. I had never been on a plane before, let alone traveled to another country by myself. But alongside the fear was a deep excitement. I was about to begin a new chapter of my life. The thought of walking into an English classroom in the USA, surrounded by other students from all over the world, made my heart race. I couldn't wait to see what lay ahead, even though the unknown was scary. On the morning of my flight, I looked around my room one last time. Everything felt so familiar, yet I knew that when I returned, I would be a different person, someone who had taken a leap into the unknown and learned something new, not just about a language, but about myself. My bags were packed, my tickets were ready, and with a mix of excitement and nerves, I said goodbye to my family and headed to the airport. As I boarded the plane, I took a deep breath. This was it. My journey to the USA, my journey to learn English, had officially begun. And despite all the nerves, I couldn't help but smile. I was finally on my way. The moment I stepped off the plane in the USA, it felt like I had entered a completely different world. Everything around me was new and exciting. The air felt different, fresher, and there was a buzz of energy that I could feel as soon as I walked through the airport. People were moving quickly, speaking in English, their voices blending together into a sound I could barely understand. I had never seen so many people from different cultures and backgrounds in one place before. It was overwhelming, but also thrilling. As I made my way through the airport, I couldn't help but marvel at the size of everything. The buildings were huge, much bigger than anything I had seen back home, and there were signs everywhere, all in English. I tried to read them, but they seemed to go by too fast. I felt a little lost, but I reminded myself that this was why I was here, to learn. Once I got my bags and headed outside, the city hit me like a wave. The streets were filled with cars, buses, and people rushing by. I heard so many different languages, but English was everywhere. I saw people talking on their phones, ordering food from street vendors, and chatting with friends. I wanted to join in, but I felt nervous. My English wasn't good enough yet, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. Still, it was amazing just to watch everything happening around me. My first stop was the student housing where I would be staying. The taxi driver spoke to me in English, but I could only understand a few words. I nodded politely and hoped I didn't seem too confused. When we arrived, I handed him some money and said, "Thank you," one of the few phrases I felt comfortable saying. He smiled and wished me a good day, but I could barely keep up with what he was saying. I realized then how much work I had ahead of me. At the student housing, I met the staff, who welcomed me with friendly smiles. They spoke English slowly, knowing that many students were not native speakers. Even though I understood some of what they said, I still felt nervous. There were so many new words, and sometimes I had to guess the meaning based on their gestures or expressions. I tried to focus, nodding and smiling, but inside, I felt a little lost. It was like I had entered a conversation that was moving too fast for me to follow. After settling into my room, I decided to explore the city. As I walked down the streets, I couldn't stop looking around. Everything seemed so big and colorful. The tall buildings reached into the sky, and there were shops and restaurants everywhere. I could smell food I had never tried before, and people were sitting outside laughing and talking. I wanted to join them, but I wasn't sure how to start a conversation. My heart raced a little as I thought about it. How would I speak to someone in English? What if I made a mistake? I walked into a small cafe, hoping to get something to eat. The menu was in English, and although I knew some of the words, I struggled to figure out what to order. When it was my turn, I hesitated, then pointed to something on the menu and said, "This, please." The cashier smiled, took my order, and said something I didn't quite understand. I felt embarrassed, but I smiled back and hoped I hadn't said anything wrong. It was a small interaction, but it made me realize how much I still had to learn. As the day went on, I started to feel a little lonely. I missed my family and friends, and I wished they were here to experience all of this with me. Everyone around me seemed so confident, speaking English like it was second nature. I, on the other hand, felt like a stranger in this big, bustling world. I knew this feeling was normal, but it didn't make it any easier. By the evening, I was exhausted. The excitement of being in a new country, combined with the constant effort of trying to understand English, had worn me out. I sat by the window in my room, looking out at the city lights. It was beautiful, but also overwhelming. I knew that learning English would be hard, but now that I was here, the reality of it was sinking in. I would have to work hard every day to improve, and there would be times when I felt lost or confused. But I also knew that this was part of the journey. I reminded myself of why I had come to the USA in the first place. I wanted to learn, to grow, and to push myself beyond my comfort zone. And even though I felt a little lost right now, I knew that each day would get better. I would meet new people, learn new words, and slowly I would start to feel more confident. This was only the beginning of my adventure, and I was ready for the challenge. As I lay down to sleep that night, I felt a mix of emotions, excitement, nervousness, and a little fear. But most of all, I felt determined. I had come to the USA to learn English, and no matter how difficult it might be, I was ready to give it my all. Tomorrow would be a new day, full of new experiences, and I couldn't wait to see what it would bring. The next morning, I woke up feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. Today was the day I would attend my first English class. As I got ready, I kept wondering what it would be like. Would I be able to understand the teacher? Would I make friends with the other students? So many thoughts were running through my mind, but I tried to stay calm and remind myself that this was why I had come to the USA. The language school was just a short walk from where I was staying, and when I arrived, I saw students from all over the world gathering outside. I heard different languages being spoken, but there was also a lot of English being used. Some people looked confident, chatting easily with each other, while others, like me, seemed a bit nervous. It was comforting to know that I wasn't the only one feeling this way. As I walked into the classroom, I was greeted by the teacher, Ms. Johnson. She had a warm smile and seemed very friendly. "Hello, everyone," she said, speaking slowly and clearly. "Welcome to your first English class." Her voice was calm and encouraging, which made me feel a little more relaxed. I could tell that she was experienced in teaching students who were just starting to learn English. The room was filled with about 15 students, and as we introduced ourselves, I realized that we were all from different countries. There was a girl from Japan, a man from Brazil, a few students from Europe, and others from places I hadn't even heard of. It was amazing to see so many people from different cultures all in one room, united by the same goal: to learn English. I smiled at the thought of how much we would learn from each other, not just about English, but about our different cultures and experiences. When it was my turn to introduce myself, I stood up and said, "Hello, my name is Rahul. I am from India, and I want to learn English to study and work in the USA." My voice shook a little, and I hoped I didn't make any mistakes. But Ms. Johnson smiled at me and said, "Well done, Rahul. We're happy to have you here." Her words gave me a boost of confidence. Throughout the class, Ms. Johnson spoke slowly, using simple words and phrases that were easy to understand. She knew that many of us were beginners, so she was careful to explain things clearly. She used pictures, gestures, and examples to help us understand the new words we were learning. I was relieved because even though I didn't know all the words she used, I could still follow along. One of the first activities we did was introducing ourselves to the person sitting next to us. I was paired with a student from Korea named Minho. He was shy at first, just like me, but we both managed to say a few sentences in English. "Hi, my name is Rahul," I said. "Where are you from?" Minho smiled and replied, "I am from Korea." "Nice to meet you." We both laughed a little, knowing that our sentences were simple, but we were proud that we could communicate even in a new language. As the class went on, I started to feel more comfortable. Ms. Johnson made the atmosphere in the room very positive, and she often repeated things to make sure everyone understood. She encouraged us to ask questions, and whenever someone struggled with a word or sentence, she patiently helped them. I realized that it was okay to make mistakes here. This was a place for learning, and no one was expected to be perfect. At one point, We practiced some basic conversations in pairs. I was nervous about speaking more English, but when it was my turn, I tried my best. I didn't always get the words right, but Ms. Johnson reminded us that the most important thing was to keep trying. The more you practice, she said, the better you will become. By the end of the class, I felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't easy, but I had survived my first English class, and I had already learned a few new words and phrases. More importantly, I had met people who were on the same journey as me. Even though we all came from different places, we shared the same goal: to learn English and improve our communication skills. As I left the classroom, I felt excited for the days ahead. There was still so much to learn, but I knew that with time and practice I would get better. My first English class had been a positive experience, and I couldn't wait to return the next day to keep improving. I walked back to my room with a smile on my face, feeling proud of myself for taking this big step. I had come to the USA with a dream, and now I was living it. There would be challenges ahead, but for the first time, I truly believed that I could do it. My journey had just begun, and I was ready for whatever came next. The first few weeks in the USA were some of the hardest weeks of my life. Even though I had started my English classes and felt a little more comfortable, there were still many challenges I faced every day. One of the biggest problems was understanding people when they spoke too quickly. In the classroom, our teacher, Ms. Johnson, spoke slowly and used simple words, but outside, it was a completely different story. When I went to the grocery store, asked for directions, or even tried to order food at a restaurant, people spoke so fast that I could barely catch any words. They used phrases and slang that I had never heard before. I often felt embarrassed when I had to ask someone to repeat what they said, and sometimes I didn't understand even after they repeated it. It made me feel like I wasn't making progress, even though I was studying hard. In class, I was doing well. I was learning new words, practicing with my classmates, and completing my assignments. But when it came to real-life situations, I still felt lost. It was frustrating because I wanted to speak English fluently and understand everything, but it felt like I was stuck. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I would ever be able to speak English as well as I wanted to. But I knew I couldn't give up. I reminded myself that learning a new language takes time and practice. So I decided to push myself even harder. Every day after class, I made it a goal to practice speaking English as much as possible. I started by talking to my classmates more. Minho, the student from Korea I had met on the first day, became a good friend of mine. We would sit together after class and have simple conversations in English. We corrected each other's mistakes and laughed whenever we said something wrong. It was comforting to know that I wasn't the only one struggling. I also started watching TV shows and movies in English. At first, I used subtitles to help me understand the words, but after a while, I tried watching without them. It was difficult, and sometimes I felt like I was missing half of what was happening. But slowly, I began to pick up new words and phrases. I realized that by listening to English every day, I was training my ears to get used to the speed and rhythm of the language. One of the most helpful things I did was start speaking to myself in English. Whenever I was alone, I would try to describe what I was doing or how I was feeling. If I didn't know a word, I would look it up in the dictionary and then practice using it in a sentence. It felt strange at first, but I knew that the more I practiced speaking, the more confident I would become. Gradually, I started to notice changes. Conversations that had once seemed too fast began to make more sense. I still didn't understand everything, but I was catching more words and phrases, and I was able to respond more quickly. In class, Ms. Johnson noticed my improvement and encouraged me to keep practicing. "You're doing great, Rahul," she said one day after class. "Just keep pushing yourself, and soon you'll see even more progress." There were still difficult days when I felt frustrated and tired. Sometimes I would have a conversation where I didn't understand anything, or I would make a mistake that made me feel embarrassed. But I tried not to let those moments get to me. Instead, I reminded myself of how far I had already come. When I first arrived in the USA, I could barely have a conversation in English. Now, I was speaking with my classmates, understanding TV shows, and even making small talk with strangers. Little by little, I was becoming more confident. I no longer felt as nervous about speaking English, and I began to take more chances. I started asking questions in class, volunteering to speak in front of the group, and even joining conversations with students I didn't know very well. Each time I spoke, I felt a little more sure of myself, and I could see the progress I was making. One day, while sitting in a cafe, I realized something had changed. I overheard a conversation between two people at the table next to me, and for the first time I understood almost everything they were saying. They were talking about their weekend plans, and I followed along without having to translate every word in my head. It was a small moment, but it felt huge to me. I smiled to myself, feeling proud of how much I had improved. Learning English was still a challenge, and I knew there was much more to learn, but I had started to see that progress wasn't just about becoming fluent overnight. It was about the small victories, understanding a conversation, using a new word correctly, or feeling confident enough to start a conversation with someone new. Each of those moments showed me that I was getting better, even when it didn't always feel like it. My journey was far from over, but I was no longer afraid of the challenges. I knew that with hard work, patience, and practice, I would continue to improve. I had already come so far, and I was excited to see how much further I could go. One of the best things that happened after I arrived in the USA was making new friends. At first, it was hard because I didn't know anyone, and I wasn't confident in my English. But slowly, things started to change. One day after class, Minho, the student from Korea I had become close with, invited me to go to a cafe with him and some other classmates. I was nervous because I wasn't sure if I could keep up with the conversation, but I decided to join them. When we arrived at the cafe, I met a few other students, Lena from Brazil, Ahmed from Egypt, and Sophia from Italy. They were all learning English like me, and I quickly realized that we had something in common. We were all trying to improve our English, and we could help each other. We ordered coffee, and soon we started talking about our countries, our families, and why we wanted to learn English. Everyone spoke slowly and tried to use simple words so that everyone could understand. I felt comfortable because we were all learning together. Even when someone made a mistake or didn't know a word, we laughed and helped each other. It felt like a safe space where I could practice without feeling embarrassed. As the weeks went by, our little group of friends started spending more time together. After class, we would often meet at the cafe, the park, or sometimes the library to study. Whenever we were together, we spoke only in English, even though it wasn't always easy. Sometimes it took us a while to explain something or find the right words, but we were patient with each other. We all knew that the more we practiced, the better we would get. One of my favorite places to practice English was the park. It was a big, beautiful park with green trees, a pond, and lots of benches where we could sit and talk. On weekends, we would meet there to relax and practice. We talked about our favorite movies, our experiences in the USA, and our dreams for the future. I learned so many new words just by listening to my friends and asking questions when I didn't understand something. Sophia, who was very good at English, often helped me with my pronunciation. She would say a word slowly, and then I would repeat it until I got it right. Ahmed was always teaching us funny expressions he had learned from watching TV shows. Lena loved reading books, and she would often recommend simple English books that I could read to improve my vocabulary. Each of my friends brought something different to the table, and I felt lucky to have them. One day, we decided to visit the public library together. It was a huge building with thousands of books, and we spent hours walking through the aisles. I picked up a few beginner-level English books to help me practice. Lena helped me choose some that were interesting but not too difficult. As we sat in the library, quietly reading, I realized how much my English had improved just by being with my friends. Every day I learned something new. Sometimes it was a new word or phrase, other times it was how to use a word correctly in a sentence. My friends were always there to help, and in return, I tried to help them whenever I could. We corrected each other's mistakes, shared tips, and encouraged one another to keep practicing. The more time I spent with my friends, the more confident I became in speaking English. I no longer felt afraid to make mistakes, because I knew that every mistake was a chance to learn. And with friends like Minho, Sophia, Lena, and Ahmed by my side, learning English became something I enjoyed. It wasn't just about studying in class or doing homework. It was about living, laughing, and growing together. I started looking forward to our daily meetups, knowing that each conversation was helping me get better. Whether we were sitting in the cafe talking about our dreams, walking through the park discussing our favorite foods, or studying quietly in the library, I was constantly learning. My friends had become my biggest supporters, and I was grateful to have them on this journey with me. As the weeks passed, I noticed that I wasn't just learning English from my teachers. I was learning it from life, from the people around me, and from the experiences we shared together. Making friends had turned out to be one of the most important parts of my English learning journey. Every day, with their help, I felt like I was getting closer to my goal of speaking English fluently. After months of hard work, practice, and determination, I started to notice real changes in my English. The journey had been challenging, but every day brought new progress. I remember the first time I realized how far I had come. It was a sunny afternoon, and I was sitting in the park with my friends, enjoying our usual conversations. As we talked about our weekend plans, I suddenly noticed that I wasn't translating words in my head anymore. I was speaking naturally, without fear or hesitation. It was an incredible feeling. I had come a long way from those early days when I could barely keep up with conversations. Now I was able to express myself confidently, understand jokes, and even join in on more complex discussions. I no longer felt nervous about making mistakes because I had learned that mistakes were part of the process. I could ask questions, answer confidently, and even help others who were struggling. It felt like I had achieved something big. One day after class, Ms. Johnson asked me to stay back. I wondered if I had done something wrong, but when she spoke, her words filled me with pride. "Rahul, I've noticed a huge improvement in your English," she said with a warm smile. "You've worked so hard, and it's paying off. You should be very proud of yourself." Hearing that from my teacher meant the world to me. Ms. Johnson had always believed in me, even when I doubted myself, and her encouragement had helped me keep going. I felt the same sense of gratitude towards my friends. They had been there for me every step of the way, practicing with me, laughing with me, and supporting me when things were tough. I remember one day when we all gathered at the cafe, and I told them how much they had helped me. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, looking at Minho, Sophia, Lena, and Ahmed. "You've all been amazing friends, and I'm so grateful for everything." Minho smiled and gave me a friendly pat on the back. "We've all helped each other, Rahul. That's what friends are for." Lena nodded, her eyes bright. "And look how far you've come. You should be proud of yourself." I smiled, feeling both happy and emotional. I had worked hard, but I knew that the support of my friends and teacher had made all the difference. Together, we had created an environment where learning was fun, where mistakes were just opportunities to grow, and where we encouraged each other to keep going, no matter how difficult it got. With my improved English, life in the USA became easier. I could have conversations with strangers, navigate the city without feeling lost, and even order food at restaurants without any trouble. The fear and anxiety I had once felt about speaking English had disappeared, replaced by a sense of confidence and excitement. I was proud of the progress I had made, and for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. But even though I had reached a major milestone in my journey, I knew that learning was a never-ending process. There was still so much more to learn, new words, new ways to express myself, and new experiences to explore. I was excited to continue improving, and I knew that with the foundation I had built, I could reach even greater heights. As I looked back on my journey, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had come to the USA with a dream of learning English, and now that dream was becoming a reality. But more than just improving my language skills, I had grown as a person. I had learned to be patient, to embrace challenges, and to never give up, even when things got tough. I had also made amazing friends and created memories that would last a lifetime. Before I left the cafe that day, I raised my cup of coffee and said, "To new beginnings, to friendship, and to always learning." My friends smiled and raised their cups with me. It was a simple moment, but it represented so much. I was no longer the boy who felt lost in a foreign country. I was now someone who could face challenges, adapt, and thrive. Learning English had been the key to unlocking a new world for me, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take me next. And so, my journey continued, filled with excitement, new goals, and the endless possibilities that come with learning something new.